5 minutes before the next panel.
Okay. So actually, we have 2 minutes.
Oh.
Yeah, 2 minutes. Yes.
Yeah. So be on the standby because you guys are the first ones. Okay. But I will just say something very quickly and then you pass. I pass it on to you.
In fact, Dr. Wafa is going to start.
Dr. Wafa, the first person?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good.
So
this is Wafa Thabet Mezghani.
Mezghani, yes.
And she is from Sfax.
Yes, yeah.
جميل خالص. Okay.
You don't need to worry.
And we have an empty house in Karkana.
Wallah.
Oh, this is good news.
You know something? I'm gonna promote you now from a colleague to a friend.
Honored.
Okay, and if I actually have the keys to the house, I will promote you to do BFF, best friend forever.
You will have the keys anyway, anytime, really anytime.
Do you really mean it, Dr. Wafa?
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk after.
So we know where the next sabbatical is going to be.
No, wait. So now we know what it takes to become a BFF. Just keys. Huh?
Yeah, okay.
The steps
okay.
Motion.
So where is everybody? I see 27 people now on, but they should have really their camera on and they start. Okay. I don't want us to be late, so I'm gonna start.
Excellent.
Okay, welcome back. I hope that you had a good rest, lunch, breakfast, whichever your time zone. Okay, we're going to start now with panel 2, titled Arab Women and Media, and the chair is Dr. Maher Bahloul of the American University of Sharjah. And we have a number of people on this panel, and the beauty of it is that it's now we're delving into a new area and that is the media, the field of media, women and media. So I'm going to give now the floor to Dr. Maher to introduce his panelists, and bearing in mind that the doctor himself, along with Ms. Amal Bahloul and Ms. Wafa Barda, also will have their own panel and presentation. So, Dr. Maher, tfaddal.
Okay, well, I cannot thank you really enough for this particular opportunity. It's a pleasure and an honor to be associated within this conference and to be able to introduce excellent speakers from different really parts of the MENA region.
Thank you.
You know, Arab women and media, I feel like this is a field I have been a little bit experimenting with. The media, which is really a huge thing. And I know, I mean, if there is anything that could probably bring positive or negative attributes to humans in general is the media, to women in particular is the media. And today we will hear a number of speakers. We will, before we start, I just want to say that really what you say does matter, and what you really write matter even more. And we heard earlier about how writing is important, but what you do really matters the most. And this is just to give you know, credit to Dr. Kamal and to his team in really making this particular forum and this conference come true, because this comes not from saying and writing, this is coming from doing. I would like to invite everybody to really open your mic and then give him a round of applause so he can hear each one of us clapping and applauding. Everyone, please, everyone, turn on your mic. This is recorded, Dr. Kamal, right?
Yes, it is recorded.
Yeah, just panel is composed of Dr. Wafa Thabet Mezghani from the University of Sfax and Aix-Marseille, where she did really her PhD thesis. Dr. Rafiqa Zahroni from the Nabel Higher Institute of Languages, and Ms. Hadil Tayyib. This is from the, she comes to us from the Media Majlis, Northwestern University in Qatar. I hope she has joined us. Yes, she did. Excellent. Okay. So in addition to these great three speakers, myself, Ms. Wafa, and Ms. Amal, we have also a short second talk. And without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Wafa to start her first talk about the Tunisian female filmmakers, filmmakers, cinema, and an action against silence and silencing. There is no need to say more about this. We have to mute our mics and keep silent to hear Dr. Wafa. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Wafa. Dr. Wafa, you have the floor. I'll mute my mic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bahloul. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you today. As we talked about how writing is a... Is
Go
my
ahead.
voice clear? Okay. As we talked about, writing is an act of resistance. I'm going to talk about how filmmaking also can be considered as an act of resistance. So I'm going to. They said I cannot share my screen. Someone is opening his screen, so you need. Okay. Someone needs to.
Yeah.
You can do now. You can do now.
All right. So I'm going to share with you my screen. All right. So Tunisian filmmakers, cinema as an action. So the current study shows how silence is perceived and conceived by two Tunisian female filmmakers, and how Tunisian women cinema could be seen as an action against silence and silencing. It introduces the general background to the paper by referring to the context of Tunisian cinema and the theme of silence and silencing. It reviews related literature, employs qualitative research techniques by applying Fairclough's framework of analysis to a corpus of two films produced at the beginning of the 21st century. It consists of three stages: this framework, description, interpretation, and explanation. So I'm going to describe the techniques, then interpret them, then explain them. Then, in part finding and discussion, I'm going to apply the aforementioned toolkit and framework to the corpus of two films. They are analyzed and discussed with the emphasis on the processes of interpretation and production. The concluding section proposes to cover the following points, offering a summary of the main findings through a synthesis of interpretation and explanation, returning to the concept of voicing and explaining its importance in anchoring the meaning of silence in films and suggesting its use as a systematic model of analysis, and highlighting the implication of the study, and finally concluding by referring to the important role of activists and researchers in shaping the direction of film industry. So Tunisian present and even past is replete with women filmmakers who have used films to fully critique the social order of Tunisian society, redefining gender roles, raising women's status through spreading awareness and challenging the status quo, and subverting the patriarchal dominant narrative in order to enhance the quality of women's lives. Through films, which is an art as well as cultural institution, Tunisian female filmmakers have strived to make use of the behavioral as well as the cognitive effects of this medium to change people's attitudes and beliefs by offering audience a new world view and new perspective and challenging what is used to be thought as taken for granted. The background to the study: directing films is a career dominated by men, a situation that has persisted since the invention of cinema. However, in Tunisia, where women enjoy relatively better conditions due to the what do you call the code of personal status in 1956, they relatively enjoy better conditions in comparison to other parts of the Arab world. Yet filmmakers have recently emerged with productions where silence or the unsaid is a major focus, either noted in the film's title or depicted as a recurring theme throughout a career dominated by men. We can mention The Silences of the Palace, Men Seasons, Nadia and Sarah by Mufidat Lately, Fatin Hafnawi, Red Satin, and Wafa, The Secret by Rajel Ameri, Noura Dreams by Hind Boujma'a. It's 2019. All these films depict women's confrontation either with social injustices and mistreatment or with themselves in their quest to free their silent bodies. They all feature highly impressive and expressive moments of silence. Besides, silence has been investigated using several different academic disciplines, notably psychology, philosophy, literature. However, the depiction of silence in films is rarely considered as a subject area for reflection and inquiry in its own right. So film is an art form and a cultural institution that has behavioral as well as cognitive effects. It helps to offer new worldview and create gendered, ethnic, and sexual identities, and therefore is deemed worthy of serious academic consideration. So seeing through the lenses of female filmmakers is an attempt to explore the representation of women's silences and silencing is as modeled by their cultural experiences, how producing films that pivot around the theme of silence could be a strategy of resistance, a battleground to combat silence and silencing and make voices heard. In fact, critical discourse analysis (CDA) studies have conventionally focused mainly on discourse as a loci to produce social injustices and inequality or to keep the status quo of the established elite. However, relatively speaking, only few CDA studies have focused on discourse as a loci of resistance and to introduce a systematic model for analyzing silence in films. This puts emphasis on the critical need to hear and pay attention to women's silences. So I'm going to try to answer the following question. How do female filmmakers depict silence in relation to women? What does silence convey? When do women keep silent? What are the scenarios where silence is highlighted? What are the semiotic forms of silence? What are the techniques and nonverbal behavior that frame foreground silence in films? Why do we need the concept voicing to understand silence in films? Can films produced by women be considered as a voice against silencing? Does silence articulate critiques of prevailing sexist ideology? Can we talk about a counter cinema or just a different cinema? Are the female filmmakers' agendas feminist? So I'm going to talk about the related lines of research, assuming that films produced by female filmmakers can be a site for social and psychological conflicts of the subaltern and marginalized classes, and that they are able to show manifestation of resistance and empowerment. This paper aims to examine the mechanisms that express these conflicts. It reviews related literature. So these are the related lines of literature. So from the cultural studies, we have to consider how silence considers the social position of subservient and marginalized women in relation to a dominant patriarchal society, and tackles the phenomenon of silence as it relates to ideology, nationality, and gender. Films, they are considered as a kind of text that should not, as any other text, studied in a vacuum, but must be studied within a social relation and system through which it is produced and consumed. when it comes to also cultural studies, we have the patriarchal ideology. Cinema is often regarded as a mediator of patriarchal ideology because most films produced by men. So, by which the minority maintain their power and domination over the majority by non-coercive means. The minority class dominates the production and distribution of goods, as well as the dissemination of ideas and meanings, so that the ideological system maintains the status quo to their advantage. Thus, gender stereotyping in movies is due to male domination of the means of production in the film sector. This is a claim also. The input of media studies and interest in media studies stems from the fact that people live in a mediated environment. Interest extends to their role in representing social and cultural practices that reflect produces ideological orientation. Thus, the roles of media in producing races, xenophobia, in presenting the other, and presenting cultural diversity have been key research topics in the few decades. The idea of both. Also, the idea of representation is very important because when it comes to women, it's often claimed that they are typically portrayed as passive, decorative objects, objectified for the male gaze to be looked attedness. This is the Mulvey idea. From the also social cognition perspective, stereotypes can be conceived as belief systems characterizing various social groups. These cognitive structures affect the encoding and processing of information. So particularly information pertaining to the outer group of members. In addition, media may be considered as a major supplier of stereotypical information about gender, class, and ethnic groups. Therefore, if viewers constantly see women in stereotypical roles on screen over a long period of time, then the social cognition approach would suggest that the way people retrieve and encode information about this group would certainly be affected by this social cognitive structure. The idea of framing is very important as well, whether in psychology, whether in sociology, framing, the idea of framing. So the idea is when women filmmakers are taught to select themes, actors, angles, and colors, among other codes, to frame a particular processing of films and to lead to particular judgments and evaluations to what is referred to by Met as ideological framing. Hence, the idea of films as a battleground of resistance and shaping the ideas of viewers. The input of film studies. So film studies have approached films from the different perspectives, and they are interested in the formal aesthetic and the socio-ideological perspective. But feminists, for example, see that having the ability to organize and control the point of view from which a film is shot puts the male in a privileged position, enabling him to look at women in ways which either sadistically punish, I'm quoting, to look at women in ways which either sadistically punish or satisfyingly fetishize the always threatening image of women into the male psyche. Following Bazin's dictum that style creates meaning, the current research will investigate both the aesthetic and the cultural dimensions of the film under scrutiny, and examine to what extent the aesthetic dimension reflects the female filmmaker's social and cultural circumstances, especially when considering silence. The combination of particular shots to obtain a final sequence is similar to the combination of words so as to have a meaningful sentence. The meaning of the former juxtaposition of shots could be reinforced and undermined if we use other codes. Here I refer to the grammar of the visual design and how film is a language in itself and it has its own grammar. So the syntagmatic and the paradigmatic relationships have a very important effect on the reading of films and the shaping of ideas. Feminist film theory. Feminism as a movement exists to challenge the belief that women are unequal to men and that they have lower status and less economic power. Gender and power relations are central themes in feminist thinking. For feminist film theory, which has been influenced by these feminist movements and women's studies within academic circles, argue that media reinforce the unequal position of women by producing narrow images of them, such as being passive or objects of desire. They study the way filmmakers portray women in a stereotypical manner and how this presentation is both shaping and being shaped by society's sexist and patriarchal ideology. Feminists in general agree that feminist film theory and practice play a pivotal role in raising women's consciousness regarding their subordination. Women in films. From the very beginnings of the film industry, women were generally excluded from the filmmaking process, with their roles being limited to non-technical areas such as makeup and costume. However, things changed with the rise of feminism. Now, as we said, film is regarded as a battleground and ideological tool by which women could challenge the stereotypes and the limited images offered by the hegemonic and misogynist male-dominated cinema. To counteract these images, women recognize the need to empower themselves by offering other alternatives as to how they see themselves and how they see the world. The input of pragmatics of silence. There are many different kinds of silences: thematic silence, gender-related silence. So also it's very important to talk about it in this paper. There has recently been shift towards more precision in defining silence and differentiating it from silencing. For example, Mayer draws attention to the importance of distinguishing between silence and silencing. It can be, the first one can be seen as a result of personal choice, but silencing clearly involves choices made by the other people as well as by the potential speaker. The input of critical discourse analysis. I talked about ideology. It's important also to talk about context. I'm going to skip this. I'm going to talk, the aim of feminist critical discourse analysis is to show up the complex, subtle, and sometimes not subtle ways in which frequently taken for granted gender assumptions and hegemonic power relations are discursively produced, sustained, negotiated, and challenged in different contexts and communities. Lazar, and to draw attention to the asymmetry of power as a result of gender ideology structure. The concept of ideology is of great relevance as ideologies may affect the way people produce particular discourse as well as the way particular people process discourse and read particular text. In patriarchal society, where power asymmetry between the sexes is the rule, where all the institutions and social practices naturalize the social inequality and sustain the social order that disempowers women and favors men, then it's quite natural that these beliefs will form the basis of discourse of dominance or will trigger the discourse of resistance.
Just to remind you, Dr. Wafa, you still have 9 minutes. So if you want to go to the cases you would like to deal with.
Yes. Okay. So our I will skip. I will talk about the methodology, the use of sampling and synopsis of each film. So here we have the Red Satin. The plot of Red Satin is rather simple. Lilia is a widow who wants to live life again. Her teenage daughter is getting interested in boys and integrating more Western ways into her lifestyle. One night, while trying to follow her daughter's activities into the night, Lilia inadvertently discovers cabaret, Satin, Rouge, Red Satin. She enters to find women belly dancing, reacting in both a horrified and triggered fashion at the same time. Lilia becomes drawn towards dancers and drum music. She befriends one of the belly dancers and she was encouraged into dancing for the audience. We will discuss this. Lilia also starts a romance with one of the cabaret musicians who is also romancing Selma, her daughter. In pursuing her desire to find her own individuality and to break the moralistic mold of her upbringing, Lilia undergoes a complete and radical transformation. When at the start of the film she is seen as a sad, bored, and submissive woman who rarely leaves the comfort of home, she is seen by the conclusion as being a dominant matriarchal figure. As I Open My Eyes is the other film. At the heart of the film, we have Farah, aspiring teenage rock singer. The event takes place after the dawn of the Arab Spring. And Farah music addresses politics and issues in her home country using subversive lyrics that question the status quo. She continues to sing and rebel even as the police begin to follow her, and her movements are monitored. The film captures the atmosphere of fear of repressive society and highlights the level of political surveillance imposed by the dictatorship. So here are the techniques used. We have all the different kinds of pragmatics of silence, film techniques, semiotics, which is the three angles. And hence we have the idea of voicing. So this is what I did. I read all the films. I tried to find a different way of reading the silence in films, or the resistance to silence in films as well, through the cinematography, the camera work, the plot, the angles of the camera movement, etc. So each film has its own motivation in challenging the silence. So Farah grew up in an era known for its oppression, lack of openness, and constant mistrust, with the risk of betrayal where all have ears, where your neighbor, your friend, your colleague, your etc. can hear. So she refused the compromises accepted by her parents to live in harmony with the oppressive, alienating political system. The same thing with Red Satin, is driven by her irresistible desire to rediscover her body through dancing after realizing how she had become oblivious of herself for the sake of raising her daughter. She feels compelled to lead a double life and to keep her night activities a secret. She wants to maintain the appearance of a devoted mother and faithful grieving widow who has left her carnal needs behind her. So after describing all this, I come to the idea of interpretation. So whenever we interpret a text, be it written or a visual text, participants draw upon their background knowledge to interpret the text. So here we have members' resources, as defined by Fairclough. It is something which people have in their head and draw upon when they produce or interpret in interpretation or production, including their knowledge of language, representation of the natural and social world they inhabit, values, their beliefs, assumptions, and so on. Understanding discourse is a memory process that involves retrieving stored information from the memory. So when interpreting silence as claimed by Curzon, one refers to stereotypical scenarios called schemata. So what can we see here in those films? There is a kind of valorization of artistic expression. We talked in the previous presentation, we talked about singing in prison. Singing could be seen also as a kind of resistance. So each of the two filmmakers have displayed a common schema, namely their valorization of art. There is a cognitive structure shared between the two of them. This is realized through the discourse and transferred through discourse, so that one is compelled to see the art as liberating. So in Red Satin, we have Raja Mary makes Lilia come to life through dancing. She learns how to love her body, how to feel happy, and how to enjoy life again. In the film, as I open my eyes, Leila Bouzid chooses singing as a way to empower her main character. Farah's voice is used to illustrate the dissatisfaction felt by the youth of her age. There are also instances of involvement that we can see in the films. In expressing the preposition in every discourse, people leave traces, dibogram, and cues that serve as a base for detecting their involvement. Example, in Red Satin, where Leila is by herself, whether cleaning, we have dinner, waiting, we can see that the filmmakers, there is a kind of emotive involvement by filmmakers, by making, for example, scene of loneliness look long, by using cinematic techniques to show the close-up, how that sad, that face, or by high angles that show the actress in a very vulnerable position. So this is the language of cinema when we use high angles, low angles, when we use the close-up, extreme close-up. All these express the involvement of the female filmmakers. So so now we come to the idea of explanation. How much time?
You're almost running out of time. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. So
I suggest you summarize.
I need just 5 minutes, and I'm going to finish. Okay. So it's pertinent to explain the why of it by looking at the historical. So we have here discourse of, as we said, as a resistant. that the films under investigation display references to discourse of inequality, gender relationships, sexual orientation, ageism, racism, and also enact strategies of resistance towards these forms and practices. Also, we have, for example, the representation of widowhood. In those films, we have challenge the discourse that arises that widows is the end, is the end. Also, we have patriarchal and neo-patriarchal discourses in those films. They can be seen in light of discourse that challenges the patriarchal and neo-patriarchal discourses. Family models, the state, the government, etc. So, Tunisian filmmakers, despite having a limited cinema industry and relatively small population, Tunisia has had the largest number of female filmmakers in the Maghreb. They are actively encouraged to strive for educational achievement and to have their voice heard in politics, economic affairs, and cultural issues. This is facilitated by comparatively liberal jurisdiction in terms of gender equality. However, working on documentaries or feature films, these filmmakers have always chosen a subject for women and their role in society as the focal point for their efforts. Their themes tend to either highlight the anomalies and contradictions lived through and endured by women in Tunisian society, or alternatively, they offer empowerment for women by presenting successful role models. So,
please summarize.
Okay, I'm going to summarize. All right, I'm going to summarize. If the cinema industry continues to be dominated by men, it will mean that it is they who will decide who is shown and what is shown and in what way. Within the feminist movement and feminist studies, there has been a call to raise awareness of the importance to increase involvement of women in the world of cinema, not just as actresses and producers, but also as content designers and agents in the process of production. Obviously, there is a dialectical relationship between scholars, filmmakers, and activists in shaping the current state and future direction of the film industry, with more roles being claimed by women scholars by means of their studies and inform activists, who in turn engage in a number of endeavors to raise awareness. So until we have a literature from the silence, we probably do not have a full critique of their social order from their perspective, nor will we have their proposed solutions or the means of sharing their daily work. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Mezghani, for this wonderful talk. We need time to digest, but the concepts, and I think the silence of silencing are very interesting. And because we don't have enough time, so if you have some questions, keep them and share them with us on the chat, and we will manage them at some point.